the Neko Rig, one of the hottest techniques in bass fishing. Yes, I called it the Neko Rig. That is the way you're supposed to say it. I have had a habit, and a lot of people call it the Neko Rig. It doesn't matter what you call it, Neko Rig, Neko Rig. I'm gonna explain to you exactly what it is and how to fish it, how to get started with it, and you need to add this technique to your repertoire. So first of all, what is a Neko Rig? Well, basically, it's when you take a straight worm, rig it wacky style. So we're just gonna take this hook, rig it wacky style right in the middle, and then you're gonna take a nail weight and you're gonna put it right into the head of the worm. And so once that is in there, it's gonna fall vertically like that. And then when you pull it, it's gonna pulse the worm, and then it'll go back straight. So that's what the Neko Rig is. And there's a bunch of different weights that you can put on there. There's a bunch of different baits. I have experimented extensively with hooks, with baits, and with weights, and with, you know, rod and reel setups. I'm gonna explain all that to you right now. So hopefully you can watch this video, then you can go out there on the water and catch fish using this cool, fun, new Neko Rig technique. So first of all, we're gonna get started with the hook. I use two different hooks. The one I use is when I'm using lighter weights with no weed guard. This is the Gamakatsu G-Finesse drop shot hook. Amazing hook, amazing hook. Most of the time, I'm gonna have a 1/0, and this one right here is the 1/0 right here. And this is what I'm gonna use when I'm gonna use a 1/32 ounce weight exclusively, or with a 16th. Most of the time, I'm gonna have this with a 16th ounce, because the reason is, with those lighter weights, now this is a 1/32 ounce weight, very small little weight that goes in your worm. This is a 1/16, slightly bigger. Most of the time when you fish these two weights, the bait is gonna be off the bottom most of the time. It's gonna be, you know, you're gonna be pulsing it and then reeling up your slack. We'll go over the technique a little bit later and how to do it. But you're gonna be reeling up your slack and just pulsing that rod and making that bait pulse, 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 pulse. Most of the time, the bait's gonna be off the bottom. So I want that hook that's exposed, don't have to worry about anything. I like this hook right here. If I'm gonna be fishing a little heavier weight, you know, the 1/8 ounce or a 3/16. 3/16 is the heaviest that I use with the Neko Rig. I'm gonna be using this G-Finesse weedless stinger hook. And that's this hook right here. It's got two titanium weed guards right there. You can throw that thing right in some brush and bring it out, because when you're fishing that 1/8 and the 3/16 ounce sizes, the bait's gonna be on the bottom quite a bit. You may have some instances where you're gonna be pulling it over branches, pulling it over logs. That's why the weedless portion works very well. Both of them don't seem to impede the action hardly at all, or any. So using either one of these two hooks is perfectly acceptable in my book. There are other good hook options on there. Those are just the ones that I like. And then the weedless versus the non-weedless versions to get started. But this is the Missile Baits quiver. There's two sizes. The Missile Baits quiver 4.5 and the 6.5 is 4.5 inches and 6.5 inches appropriately. There's basically any straight worm can work. And one of the reasons I designed this worm the way I did was because it has that blunt end, and it's very easy to just stick one of these weights right into the head of there. I mean, you saw how easy that is, and that's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna come out when you're slinging it around. But that's one of the reasons I designed that, and that's why I like the quiver for throwing the Neko Rig. And then when you do hook it on there, I've seen some people hook down here, you know, up towards the 3/4 up the worm, you know, 2/3 up the worm, halfway up the worm, you know, a little bit below halfway. I can't say that there's one wrong way to do it. I just know this much. The further down the worm you go, the more you're gonna get hung up if you're using an exposed hook. If you, the further up you go, kind of, you can kind of understand that, the less hung up you're going to be. A lot of people use O-rings on their wacky worms and their Neko rigs. The O-rings are okay, and the O-rings will actually keep your hook in line with the worm, so that helps keep it hung up less. But I also feel like that you don't get as good a hookups, and you have a tendency to lose more fish when you use the O-rings, no matter if it's one of those wacky saddles or whatever kind of deal you're going to put on there. When that hook is perpendicular to the worm, just like this right here, perpendicular to the worm, that's the way I like to have it hooked up and rigged. I feel like when the fish gets it, that is a really, really high hookup ratio, and you're gonna get a really good number of fish that you hook up with. You're gonna get those fish in the boat the way that is. I feel like that no O-ring on there lets that worm slide up and down, lets it fly off if it needs to. The most important thing to me is that I get that fish in the boat. I get that fish in the boat, and that's all that matters. And just to show you, I've even Neko rigged, and this is actually one of the baits that my 8-year-old daughter was throwing. She likes the little Ned bomb, little teeny small bait. It's a 3 1/4 inch bait, and she Neko rigs that little bait, and she has caught more fish than you can imagine. That's what she likes to throw, with the little 1/32 ounce weight. And I turned one of my roommates, Ed Lochran, onto that at one of the tournaments last year, and he caught a 4-pounder on it in a highly pressured area with a bunch of other anglers that had already fished through that area. Just a very subtle, small, totally different action and presentation, and that's really what you're doing here with the Neko rig. So then I'm gonna go quickly into the rod reel line combination, and then we'll get into how to fish it. The spinning rod is the way to go, and I don't care how big or how long of a worm. I mean, if you're doing something crazy with like a 14-inch worm, that might be a different ball game. But I'm talking conventional, normal 4 to 7-inch worms. You're gonna have a spinning rod in your hand. I really like 8 and 10-pound test. I've gone up to 12. I like if I'm using a 4 to 5-inch worm, I'm gonna go 8-pound leader. I use Sunline Sniper. It's just kind of my standard. And then when I'm gonna go with a little bit bigger, like the Quiver 6.5, I'm gonna bump up to 10-pound. With 10-pound Sniper, you can really tighten down on your drag, and when that fish bites it, you can reel into them and get a good meaty hook set. I mean, there's no joking around. I've caught a lot of 4-pound fish with that Neko rig, with this type worm, and I've had no problems with 10-pound test. You can skip it a little bit around. If you have lighter weights, you can skip that bait real easy as well. So that's another part of it. But I'm gonna have that leader is gonna be about 20 feet long. That leader is gonna go to 12-pound braid. That's kind of my standard. That seems to work the best for me. That longer leader allows you to retie a number of times, not have to worry about getting too short on your leader length. I really like that longer leader. And 12-pound X-Plasma braids, it's what I like on there, the Sunline. I got a 3,000 sized Daiwa reel. And then I've got a 7-foot 4-inch cash and drop shot rod. I've tried the 7-foot rods for the Neko rig, and it's okay. If that's all you've got, it's fine, that's okay. But the deal with the drop shot rod is that it's a counterbalanced rod, meaning that it's got a couple ounces of lead weight in the butt of the rod. And what that allows you to do, it allows the rod to balance, tip up a lot easier. So as I'm fishing this bait in this rod with a drop, as you would with a drop shot, you're gonna keep that rod tip up as you're fishing it. Your rod tip's gonna be up like this. We'll get to more of the technique later. But you're gonna have that rod tip up, and having that counterbalance weight makes fishing the bait much easier to do. Same is going to happen with the Neko rig. You're going to make those casts, and then you're going to keep that rod tip up as you're working it. Having that counterbalance weight makes a huge difference, and that little extra length in that 7'4" is when you get that bite and you reel down, you can really get a good hook set and get a lot of pressure on those fish. So when they go to shake their head, you're going to set that hook, you're going to get those fish in the boat. So that's kind of the whole system and the setup So I'm gonna go ahead and grab this hook. I'm gonna take and rig the quiver 4.5 right there where I like to rig it. And I'm gonna go ahead and put this 1/16 ounce weight on there. Just run it right through there. Put it in the end, and then it's nice too because that's kind of like a nail head. I can just take my fingernail and pull it right out if I need to. Not very easily, but I can pull it out. And so that's kind of what the rig looks like when I'm fishing the lighter weight. Now I'm going to stand up and show you how to fish this thing. Okay, now that we've stood up, we're ready to fish this Neko rig. We've got the 16th ounce on the 4.5 quiver, and just like any other technique, you're gonna make a cast. As that bait hits the water, I'm gonna flip my bail over, and I'm gonna watch as that bait falls. And you can even just do little rod tip shakes as that bait's falling, because what that thing is gonna it's gonna, you know, quiver up, if you will, as it's gonna sink down. You catch a lot of fish on that initial fall, especially if you're gonna you know, just make little shakes. But you know, you can let that bait go all the way to the bottom, or you can just let it go part of the way down the water column, and then start just making little teeny rod tips, like movements like that, and reeling at the same time. So that bait's just gonna quiver, sink, quiver, sink, quiver, sink, and that's how you're gonna fish it. You can let it sink to the bottom and then fish it up off the bottom on the way back. There's really not per se a wrong way to fish that, as long as you get the setup right and you understand the hooks and you understand the weights and using the different weights. Now, getting into the different weights, I don't know that there's it just depends on the depth that you're wanting to fish. I've caught a number of fish with a 1/8 and a 3/16 ounce weight in 10 to 35 feet of water. I've caught a number of fish in 30 to 35 feet of water on that Neko rig with that 3/16 ounce weight. The bait gets all the way down there, and then once that bait's down there, it's a type of action that those fish have never seen. Those fish have never seen that. Great on spotted bass, and of course the Neko rig works really good on smallmouth, and I have caught some really big largemouth on the Neko rig. So it doesn't seem to be you know, an action that only one type of fish likes. They all seem to like it. You know, there's a handful of different areas that times that I could say, hey, this is when you really need to throw it. Highly pressured areas, clearer water. Doesn't have to be super clear, and it doesn't have to be you know, in a little stain is fine as well. But clearer water seems to be good. High pressure seems to be good. Deeper grass, it is lights out on those deeper grass lines. And anytime you're fishing areas that have very little cover, you know, points, things like that, you know, everybody else is throwing a drop shot or a shaky head, man, throw that Neko rig, give them a totally different look, and you can absolutely get to waxing fish behind your buddies, in front of your buddies, beside your buddies, or just going out there and having fun by yourself. The color choices are something that I've really experimented with, and I'm a huge action, much more important than color guy. But if you can dial the color in on top of it, that's even better. That's even better. So this one right here is one of my all-time favorites in that grassy situation. This is watermelon red, watermelon candy red. This is in that deeper grass lines like I was telling you about in the summertime. That color is amazing, really tough to beat. GP3, another really good one. That's, you know, green pumpkin and purple. Green pumpkin is probably if you had to choose one color to fish with a Neko rig all the time, that would probably be the one. I have seen darker colors do really well, like June bug. Those colors have done really well for me before. But then the bait fish colors tend to excel in the fall, summer and fall. And even in the wintertime, I've seen that happen as well. But then there's other times where I want something with some orange in it, like a bammer crawl, especially in the springtime, that can be really good. But just experiment with the colors. Once you start getting a few bites, experiment with the colors. Sometimes you can find that one color that's outfishing the other ones. Sometimes it's a bait fish versus a natural. That can be the kind of difference. So don't get too hung up on, you know, if it has 12 green flakes or 14 green flakes. Don't worry about that as much as trying to just match the overall color and action and weight. That's probably the most important thing, is getting that weight just right on the Neko rig. You know, figuring out if they want the 16th ounce or the 1/32 ounce, or the 1/32 ounce versus the 1/8 ounce. You know, they might want that heavier weight in there. So experiment with those weights. Make sure you fish that thing properly. Again, as you're throwing it out there, you know, let it sink to where you can feel and see what's going on. A lot of those strikes are going to come then. Just go ahead and do a few rod shakes as that bait's falling down. Watch it and feel it. Once you get it to the desired depth range you want to fish, may not be on the bottom, just start doing those little light shakes. You don't want to put a ton of action in it. You don't want to do a bunch of rips, anything like that. You just want to do some light shakes, let that thing sit. Light shakes, let that thing sit. Now, I've caught a lot of fish on the Neko rig, letting it hit the bottom and then just kind of almost dead sticking it once it's on the bottom, maybe just making some real easy, slight twitches with the rod and get that bait to just quiver a little bit and let it sit, and then thunk, they'll come up and get that thing. But the Neko rig is something you definitely have to add to your arsenal if you're a finesse fisherman, or if you just like catching fish in general. The Neko rig explained is the way to go. And if you have any more questions or comments or anything like that, put it down there in the bottom. Smash that subscribe button if you like this video, and please let me know what else you want to see. Thanks.